Lesson 3.1, Solving Quadratic Equations. A quadratic equation is an equation in the form of ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. A root to the equation is a solution. Instead of root, they are often called zeros of the equations are also solutions. To solve a quadratic equation, you can do several different ways. One way is to solve by graphing. So you could graph the quadratic function, and the solutions are the x-intercepts of the graph. So say you graphed it, and it looks something like that. That x value and that x value will be the solutions. Or you could solve by taking square roots. And you would do this when there's only an x squared, so maybe you would have something like 0 equals 3x squared plus 4. So there's no x term. Or if you'd like, b is 0. What you do is you just solve the equation for the square and then take the square root. So in this case, we'd subtract 4 and then divide by the 3. So you get the x squared and then take a square root. When you're solving, you take a square root. Don't forget the plus and minus. Or you could solve by factoring. So you factor it, you make it equal, the equation equal to 0, factor, and then set each factor equal to 0 and solve. We'll do examples of these in a second. All right, let's solve this equation by graphing. To graph, we can just make a table. Remember, the vertex is x, part of it is at negative b over 2a. So this is a, b, c. So that would be negative a negative 2 over 2 times 1, which is 1. So our vertex is at x equals 1. So, and then we could plug it back in to find the y. So I'm plugging it into the equation to find the y value. So that is negative 4. So our vertex is at 1, negative 4. So now if I make my table, I'm going to have that kind of in the middle. So I'm going to try negative 2, negative 1, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that my 1, negative 4 is in the middle of my table. Use the calculator to get my points. And I graph it. So I have negative 2, 5, negative 1, 0, 0, negative 3, 1, negative 4, 2, negative 3, 3, 0, and 4, 5. Then I can draw a nice parabola through those points. And our answers are the points where it crosses the x-axis. So my answers are negative 1 and 3. Or we could solve by taking square roots. Notice there is only one term here that has x, and it is the x squared. So we're just going to move everything away from that x squared. So I'll probably start by subtracting 14 from both sides. Then I'll divide by 2 from both sides to get the x squared by itself. And then I need to take a square root of both sides. When you square root both sides, don't forget the plus and minus. So x equals plus and minus the square root of 28. But 28 is 4 times 7. And the square root of 4 is 2. So it's plus and minus 2 square root of 7. Here's another one. Again, this is just x squared. When it's just x squared, you can just move things away from it. The x only appears once. Just get the x by itself. The furthest thing away is the 20, so we'll get rid of the 20. So I subtract the 20, get 4x squared equals negative 4. Divide by the 4. X squared is negative 1. And now that it's x squared, we'll take a square root to solve for x. Don't forget the plus and minus. So x is the square root of a negative 1. Now remember, we can't take square roots of negative numbers and get a real answer. Therefore, there is no real solution. We'll find out in a lesson or two about unreal solutions. Here's a more interesting one we can solve by taking square roots. Notice we have x just once. The square is on the outside of that parenthesis, so we can just get everything away from the x. The most outside thing is the 3/4. To get rid of the 3/4, we'll multiply both sides by 4/3. You multiply by putting it over 1 and multiplying straight across. 10 times 4 is 40, and 1 times 3 is 3. And then we're going to square root. Don't forget the plus and minus. All right, so this will be the same thing as square root of 40 over the square root of 3. 40 is 4 times 10. So it'd be 2 square root of 10. But I can't have a square root in the bottom, so I'm going to have to multiply the top and bottom by that square root of 3. So over here now. So I'll have 2. I can multiply those square roots together. 3 times 10 is 30. And square root of 3 times square root of 3 is just 3. And then subtract 1, finally, to find out that x is negative 1 plus and minus 2 square root of 30 over 3. Let's try some solving by factoring. Well, the first step for factoring, well, first of all, notice we have both an x squared and an x, so we cannot do square roots. So we have to do something other than square roots. Could graph it, but most people don't like that. So we'll try factoring. Make it equal to 0. So we're going to subtract 48 from both sides. And then we're going to try factoring. What times what makes the x squared? It's x times x. What times what makes negative 48? Maybe 8 times negative 6. And then we check. We check outers plus inners. And that should equal the middle, which it does. Now, take each of your factors, make them equal to 0, and solve for x. So x is negative 8 and x is 6. Let's try another one. Find the zeros. When you find the zeros, you just make f of x 0. So we'll have 0 equals the function. And let's try, I see there's both an x squared and an x, So you cannot solve by square roots. Let's try factoring. Look for a common factor. There isn't any. So we say what times what makes 4x squared? We might try 2x and 2x. Then what times what makes 3 would be a 3 and 1. Notice the middle is negative, so I'll make them both negative. We check. So it'd be negative 2x minus 6x is negative 8x. That is not the negative 13x. That's the middle. So we messed up. We're going to have to try something else. Well, I know the 3 has to be just 3 and 1, so maybe the 4x would be different. Maybe I'd go 4x and 1x. Check that. Be negative 4x, negative 3x is negative 7. That's still not the middle. Wow. What if we put the 4 over here? So I still have x times 4x. All right, so the outers are negative 1x, inners are negative 12x. That gives us negative 13. Hey, we finally got it. All right, now take each factor equal to 0. Because if either factor equals 0, then the whole thing equals 0, because when you multiply by 0, it's 0. All right, so our answers are 3 and 1/4. The height of an object in feet dropped from a height s0 can be modeled by that. You might want to know that for your homework problems. For a science competition, students must design a container that prevents an egg from breaking when dropped from a height of 60 feet. That 60 feet is our S0. So write a function to model this. Well, we just said the 60 feet was S0, so looks like we just fill that in. And we're supposed to find out how long it takes to hit the ground. Well, the ground would be 0 height, so I could make this now equal 0 and solve for t. So subtract 60. I'm going to solve by taking square roots because the t squared is the only place where t shows up. Divide by the negative 16. Which gives me 15/4. And then square root. Don't forget the plus and minus. Now, since this is a word problem, we'll take a decimal approximation, and we're not going backwards in time, so we only want the positive. So it's about 1.9 seconds to hit the ground. Then it says find and interpret h of 0.5 minus h of 1.3. All right, h of 0.5 is when I plug in a 0.5 for the t. H of 1.3 is what I get when I plug in a 1.3. All right, so h of 0.5 is 56. H of 1.3 is 32.96. So if I subtract those, I get 23.04 And what is that? Well, h is the height, so if I subtract two different heights, it gives me the change in height, or how far it fell. So it fell about 23 feet between 0.5 and 1.3 seconds.